A big shout out to my friends over at Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Hey guys, before we jump into this video, I just want to quickly mention that if you want to win a Canon SL3, I'm currently giving one away to one subscriber. All you need to do to enter is go to my second channel, it'll be linked in the description box below, and subscribe over there, and you can win a Canon SL3 with 4K. Now in my hands, I've got the brand new Canon SL3, which is a really nice little camera. But before you buy it, I wanted to share with you a few things that I really like about this camera, but also some things that you should know that aren't so great as well. And by the end of this video, hopefully I'll be able to help you figure out whether or not this is the right camera for you to buy and spend your hard-earned money on. But anyway, let's now jump in and talk about the Canon SL3. So the first thing that I want to talk about with the Canon SL3, especially compared to the old Canon SL2, is its improved battery life. And I've really noticed this, and it's definitely something that you want to take note on. Now, it's not often something that's going to be the main selling point on a camera, but I've found with the Canon SL3 that battery life has been incredibly improved, especially in video mode, which is actually a really nice thing because generally in video mode, battery life can be eaten up really fast. In my testing, I was able to see that the Canon SL3 had at least double the battery life than the Canon SL2, even though it's using the same battery. Now, in the Canon SL3, we've got the LPE17 battery. In fact, I'm actually using the exact one that came out of my Canon SL2 because I have plenty of these and it works really well. The reason why the battery life is probably better is that they have a new processor in here, which might be a little bit more efficient. Now, in 4K mode, battery life does get eaten up pretty quickly, but again, it is quite a lot better than the Canon SL2, and the SL2's battery was pretty good. So in terms of battery life, the SL3 is definitely worth it. If you know you're going to be out there shooting for many hours on end, this is probably going to be a worthy purchase. Now, as always, I'd always recommend buying a few extra batteries and just bringing them along because they're pretty small and you can always be charging one on the go. But definitely the battery life on the Canon SL3 was a welcome change, and it's really nice to see that they're actually kind of improving battery life, not just letting it hang. Now, as always, guys, if you do want to purchase the Canon SL3, I'll put a link to it in the description box below. That will be an affiliate link, and it really does help out this channel. So if you got something from this video, I'd love it if you do purchase your SL3 after clicking that link. The next thing I really want to talk about on the Canon SL3 is the dual pixel autofocus. Now, if you've ever watched any of my videos, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of dual pixel autofocus, but you might be new to the world of photography or new to the world of Canon and you're not exactly sure what it is. Well, essentially, dual pixel autofocus is, to me, the best autofocus system out of any camera brand, Sony, Panasonic, Nikon, or Canon. And essentially what it allows you to do is have your camera, and wherever you point it, it's going to come into focus smoothly and cinematically, and it works fantastically on this. The Canon SL2 had it, and that was a really nice step up to have a lower end camera having great autofocus, but the Canon SL3's is just as good, and it really does make a big difference, especially if you're going to be making YouTube videos where you're filming yourself. Currently, I'm using a Canon 70D, which I've used for a number of years, which was one of the first cameras to have dual pixel autofocus, and there's no one behind me, and as you can see, hopefully I'm in focus, which makes a big difference. So dual pixel autofocus is one of the best features on the Canon SL3, and it's definitely something that I would recommend for most people. Another one of my favorite features on the Canon SL3 is a flip out articulating screen. So rather than a traditional DSLR, which just has a viewfinder and a screen on the back, this one here has a screen that can flip out, which is really useful for a few different reasons. Firstly, if you want to be taking like a group photo or a selfie, rather than getting someone to take the photo with you, you can actually turn it around and you can see yourself in the screen. This also works really well if you're vlogging. Now, if you've watched any of the big vloggers such as Casey Neistat, they'll often be vlogging like this, maybe on a Joby Gorilla Pod, and they'll be having the camera right here, and they can see themselves and see that they're in focus and being framed up nicely, and that's a really nice feature to have on the Canon SL3. The other thing, again, is if you are making YouTube videos like I'm doing right now, I can see myself and I can see the whole frame right here. Even though the camera is probably a meter or two away, it's really easy to see that I'm in frame, and you don't need an external monitor, which is really quite nice. Another thing I didn't mention is that this is a touch screen, and if you pair the touch screen up with the dual pixel autofocus, essentially all you need to do to make something go in focus is tap on the back of the screen. You can hear it, and what it's going to allow you to do is wherever you tap, that's going to smoothly and again cinematically come into focus, which is really nice because you don't have to do a manual focus pull, which is what we used to do before the days of good autofocus in DSLRs. So the back of the screen's really nice on the Canon SL3. Now on the Canon SL3, they've kind of simplified the buttons on the back, and this is something I wanted to talk about And for most people, this is going to be more than okay. And it's actually probably going to be a little bit easier and a little bit more simple, kind of a minimalized kind of back end on this camera. Whereas with the SL2, we had a few more buttons, a few more settings, and it's all right on the SL3. Now, they have removed the Wi-Fi button, which is a little bit of a bummer for me because I actually really liked the Wi-Fi button. It allowed you to quickly and easily set up the Wi-Fi connection, but you can just do it in the menu system as well. So it is important to know that. That's one of the kind of downsides on this camera. But we do have a nice array of different buttons, which will really allow you to quickly and easily change a few of the settings. Now, one thing I would have loved to have seen on the Canon SL3, which is on some larger cameras, is a secondary scroll wheel. Now we have the wheel at the top here, which allows you to change things like your shutter speed, but on a lot of those other cameras, we'll also have a wheel here, a kind of a rotary wheel which can spin. With the SL3, you've got this 4-point control button here. It works okay, but it's not as quick, so you need to generally hold down the AV button to change some of your settings. But on the back, it's quite minimal, it's quite nice, and it does have most of the things that you'll need for changing your settings. So I don't want this just to be a fluff piece and just a all positive kind of thing. I think it's important before you spend your hard-earned money that you know the positives and the cons of a camera. And there are a few cons of the Canon SL3. They might not be cons, but they're definitely things that you should know about. And they do focus generally around the 4K features on the Canon SL3. Now, you probably know that this camera shoots in 4K, but it does have a few limitations and they're important to know. So the first limitation is that in 4K, we are going to be having a crop factor. Now, the Canon SL3 generally has a 1.6 times crop factor over a full frame camera, which means it's going to be zoomed in a little bit. When you're shooting in 4K, the crop factor is significant. It increases even more. And it means that generally if you're going to be doing any kind of filming, you'll want a wider lens. So for example, if you are shooting a vlog style camera video, I'll show you right here. This is me shooting in 1080p, and I've got a 10mm lens on here, and it looks really nice because I've just got my arm out, and you can see that it's really quite a wide shot. What we're going to do now is stop the recording, and we'll jump over to the 4K. And of course, it's going to be a little bit clearer, but what you're going to see, this is a bit of a real-world life test. And now I'm shooting in 4K and you can see that it's significantly cropped. So you can't even really see my arm in the picture. And so what it's essentially going to mean is that you're going to be having to have your arm a little bit further out or go even wider of a lens. But I'm shooting on a 10mm lens here. This is a pretty wide lens to start off with. Just for testing's sake, the standard kit lens comes with an 18mm lens, and this is what it looks like. It's pretty close in, that's enough of that. As you can see, it's really probably too close in to be shooting 4K on the Canon SL3 with a 18mm lens. So this is definitely something I want you guys to know. For me, I'd be vlogging in 1080p. The video quality on it is exceptional. You don't need to be shooting in 4K all the time, but it is something you guys want to know. Now, another thing I want to talk about again, talking about the 4K, is that we can only shoot in 23.98 frames per second, or 25 frames per second, roughly 24 essentially, with the 4K. So we can't have 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second. Now, is that going to make a big difference? Well, no, but I generally like to shoot my YouTube videos in 30 frames per second because I find that 24 frames per second can be a little bit choppy looking. Now, it is a very traditional looking frame rate. 24 frames per second is what we see all movies shot in pretty much. But for things like sports, or if you're moving around, or pretty much any kind of TV work or web style work, most of it's generally done in 30 frames per second. So you are, again, limited to 23.98, roughly 24, and that's something to know as well. And one last thing is that in 4K mode, we don't have dual pixel autofocus, which is disappointing to say the least. And that's one of the best features on the Canon SL3. I really love the dual pixel autofocus. It allows you to move in and out like this without having to worry about anything to do with autofocus, and you don't need a second person. In 4K mode on the Canon SL3, dual pixel autofocus is gone. It goes to some sort of like hybrid autofocus, which is nowhere near as responsive and nowhere near as fast. Now it does work slowly, but once it's locked on, it's pretty good. You can, of course, press the button down halfway, and what this is going to do is kind of force it to look for a new autofocus spot, and it works pretty well. But again, I think it's important to know that if you do want to be shooting 4K with this, like if you're going to be vlogging or you're going to be moving the camera around a lot, dual pixel is not in that 4K mode. So again, if you're going to be doing sit-down videos like this, you're not really going to have a problem because you're not moving around that much. But if you are going to be doing vlogging and you want to be shooting in 4K, there are definitely some issues with the SL3, but it still is a fantastic camera, and it does have a really nice clean 4K output, but definitely know its limitations. So there you go, guys. There were a few talking points on the Canon SL3, a fantastic camera with a few little kind of niggles here and there, but for me, it really does punch above its weight. And if you're going to be thinking about purchasing this camera, I would recommend you go for it because it's got everything the Canon SL2 had, better battery life, and it now shoots in 4K. Of course, you do need to know a few of the ups and downs of that 4K, but it really is a fantastic camera, and I do recommend this one for you guys if you're thinking about purchasing it. Now, as always, if you do want to purchase this camera, I'll put links to it in the description box below. You can take a look. And I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Happy shooting. And if you do buy a Canon SL3, let me know. And that will be really cool. Have a great day, guys. And I'll see you in my next Canon SL3 video because I'm going to be making lots of this. Now, I'd just like to send a big shout out to my friends over at Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, which really helps out this channel. If you haven't heard of Squarespace yet, well, over there you can create beautiful, easy to make and responsive websites. You don't even need to know how to code to make a website on Squarespace. They have tons of designer and award-winning templates that you can easily use. These are created with modern browsers and mobile apps in mind, making the templates modern as well as beautiful. Not only that, updating and keeping track of your site on the go is super easy as well with their mobile app. So guys, I'd really recommend you go and check out Squarespace and sign up for a free trial. Go to squarespace.com/Chris Winter to get a free trial and 10% off your first purchase, which is pretty sweet to me.